Neuroscientists at Stanford have identified the exact biological reason why chronic overthinkers wake up at 3 a.m. with a racing heart, and it is not a lack of willpower. It is not because you are weak. It is not because you are broken. It is not even because you had one too many thoughts before bed. It is a specific, measurable cognitive cycle running inside your brain right now, and once you understand what it actually is, you will never look at a sleepless night the same way again. Today, I am going to show you the Stanford technique. It is a clinically informed method that was designed to intercept that cycle at the neurological level and force your nervous system back into deep restorative sleep. Not tomorrow, not after a week of trying, tonight. My name is Dr. Silas Kincaid, and we take the breath so we can grow the life. Let's begin. The 3 a.m. feedback cycle, why your brain turns against you. Picture this. It is 3:17 in the morning. The room is dark. Everyone in your house is asleep. You can practically feel how quiet the world is. And your brain? Your brain is running a full board meeting. Not about something simple either. It has pulled up your mortgage, your relationship, that email you sent 3 weeks ago that you are now convinced was read the wrong way, your career trajectory, and somehow it has circled back to that embarrassing thing you said at a party in 2014. And the worst part? Every single problem feels massive, catastrophic, like the walls are a little closer than they were an hour ago. Here's what I want you to understand. That is not a character flaw. That is biology, and it is doing exactly what it was designed to do, just at the completely wrong moment. Let me explain why the early morning hours feel so psychologically unbearable. During the day, your prefrontal cortex, the rational, let's think this through part of your brain, acts as a kind of moderator. It steps in between the raw signal of a problem and your emotional response to it. It says, okay, that's a concern, but here's the context. Here's what we can do. Here's what we know. At 3 a.m., that moderator goes offline. Your cortisol, your body's primary stress hormone, follows a natural daily rhythm. It bottoms out late at night and then starts climbing again in the early morning hours, preparing your body to wake up. But for chronic overthinkers, that cortisol rise happens early and sharply. It spikes before the brain is fully conscious, which means your threat detection system gets activated before your rational thinking system is even online. You wake up already alarmed, already on guard, and then your thoughts walk in through the door. Now, here's where it becomes a real problem. Stanford researchers studying something called the default mode network, the DMN, found that in people who identify as overthinkers, this neural network is dramatically more active during periods of supposed rest. The default mode network is what activates when you're not focused on an external task. It's the brain's background operating system. And in overthinkers, this network does not power down at night. It powers up. What does that mean practically? It means when you wake at 3 a.m., you are not entering a quiet mental space. You are walking into a stadium where the game has been going on without you. And here's the cruel design of it. The act of trying to force yourself back to sleep creates more alertness. Every time you check the clock, every time you calculate how many hours you have left, every time you tell yourself to just calm down, you are feeding the exact system that is keeping you awake. This is what I call the confirmation trap. Your brain is searching for evidence that something is wrong, and every anxious thought, every frustrated minute staring at the ceiling is exactly the evidence it finds. So how do we break it? Not by fighting harder, not by breathing deeper, not by telling yourself for the 100th time to just relax. The exit is something else entirely. And when I first came across the Stanford research behind it, my honest reaction was, this cannot be real. It's too simple, too strange, but the data is there, and I've watched it change people's nights in ways that years of conventional sleep advice never did. So stay with me, because what comes next is the part most people never find. The Stanford Cognitive Shuffle, how to scramble the machine. In 2019, cognitive scientist Dr. Luc Baudouin published research on a technique that would become the foundation of what we now call the Stanford Cognitive Shuffle. Here's the core insight, and it is elegant in how counterintuitive it is. Your brain cannot simultaneously solve a complex logical problem and generate random, non-threatening visual imagery at the same time. Read that again. The part of your brain responsible for problem solving, the analytical, narrative building, consequence forecasting part, operates on sequential logic. It needs a thread. It needs one thought to connect to the next in a way that makes sense. Sleep, on the other hand, requires the exact opposite. The imagery of early-stage sleep, what scientists call hypnagogic imagery, is fragmented, random, and meaningless. A red shoe, a spiral staircase, a dog wearing a hat, a field with no sky. When you are successfully falling asleep, your brain is generating those kinds of images. And here's the key. Your problem-solving mind cannot operate in that fragmented space. The two states are neurologically incompatible. So the technique is simple in design and profound in effect. Pick a random word, not a meaningful one, not family or career or tomorrow. Pick something boring, something like seagull. Now, with your eyes closed, picture a seagull, not conceptually, visually. See its feathers, see it hovering over something, see the way the wind moves it. Hold that image for a moment, then take the next letter of the word, E. Picture something that starts with E, an elephant maybe. See it, put it somewhere, a room, a field, an elevator. It doesn't matter. It just needs to be vivid and random. Then A, an acorn or an anchor or an astronaut, and so on. What's happening neurologically is extraordinary. You are manually overriding the brain's sequential problem-solving thread by forcing it into fragmented visual generation. You are essentially mimicking what the brain does naturally in the first stages of sleep, which creates a shortcut directly into that pre-sleep state. Studies using this technique showed that participants fell asleep significantly faster than those using traditional counting or breathing methods alone, not because it's magic, because it's precise neurological interruption. Now, and this matters, the technique will feel awkward the first time. Your brain will resist. It will try to pull you back to the board meeting, that email, that mortgage, that 2014 party. When that happens, don't fight it. Simply notice it, pick a new random word, and start the picture sequence again. Every time you restart, you are still interrupting the cycle. You are still winning. The goal is not to be perfect at the technique.
The goal is to make it just difficult enough for the analytical mind to stay engaged, because an engaged analytical mind cannot simultaneously spiral. That is the mental layer, and for many people, that alone is enough to change the night. But here is what I have found working with chronic overthinkers over the years. The mind and the body are not running separate programs. They are one system. And there is a physical layer to the 3 a.m. crisis that most sleep content completely ignores, one that, when you address it alongside the cognitive shuffle, produces results that feel almost unfair in how quickly they arrive. Let me show you what I mean. Environmental anchoring and cortisol control, the physical side of the fix. What happens in your nervous system shows up in your bedroom, and what happens in your bedroom shows up in your nervous system. Most people treat these as two separate problems. They are not. They are one problem wearing two faces. First, body temperature. Sleep onset is directly linked to your core body temperature dropping. When your temperature falls, your brain interprets it as a signal to initiate deep sleep. When you are lying awake, stressed, alert, slightly too warm under those sheets, you are inadvertently blocking that signal. A simple intervention? Expose your feet or your forearms from under the covers. The skin on your extremities acts as a radiator. Heat escapes quickly through those surfaces, your core temperature drops, and the sleep signal gets sent. Second, and this is something a lot of people resist, the 15-minute rule. If you've been lying awake for what feels like 15 or more minutes, get up. I know what you're thinking, but if I get up, I will be more awake. I will lose whatever momentum I had. Here's why that logic is backward. Your brain is an associative organ. It builds powerful links between environments and mental states. Every minute you spend lying awake, stressed in your bed, you are training your brain to associate your mattress with anxiety. Over time, simply walking into your bedroom begins triggering the alert state before your head even hits the pillow. Getting up breaks that association. Go somewhere dim. Do something quietly monotonous, a jigsaw puzzle, a slow walk around the house, a few pages of a physical book with no stakes. Do not check your phone. Do not turn on bright lights. After 20 minutes or so, when you feel that first pull of genuine tiredness, go back to bed and begin the cognitive shuffle. Now let's talk about 2026. We have tools now that our grandparents and, frankly, our 2010 selves could never have imagined for sleep intervention. Haptic wearables, devices that can monitor your heart rate variability, detect the subtle signs of wakefulness, and deliver a gentle, rhythmic pulse to your wrist that mimics the cadence your nervous system naturally falls into during sleep transitions. Some users report that the sensation alone is enough to begin the downshift. Smart lighting. Circadian-tuned bulbs that shift automatically through the evening from stimulating blue-white spectrums to deep amber tones. If your bedroom or living space is still emitting cool blue saturated light past 9 p.m., you are sending your brain the neurological equivalent of a sunrise signal. The melatonin response is suppressed. Your system doesn't know it's supposed to be winding down. These are not gimmicks. They are calibrated interventions that work with your biology instead of against it. And when they're paired with the cognitive techniques we just covered, the compound effect is measurable and rapid. Here's what that actually looks like in practice. A person who commits to the cognitive shuffle, plus the temperature drop, plus the 15-minute rule, plus circadian-tuned light, they're not solving one problem. They're closing 4 separate doors that cortisol was using to get back in. Each door you close means the remaining ones carry less force. And within 2 weeks, most people report something they had genuinely stopped believing was possible for them. They stopped watching the clock. Not because they forced themselves to stop, not because they told themselves it didn't matter, but because the body stopped sending the alarm in the first place. The bedroom stopped being a place they dreaded lying in. The night stopped being a test they kept failing. That shift from dread to neutrality is not a small thing. For a chronic overthinker, that's the whole thing. And it turns out the way you spend your day either makes that shift faster or blocks it entirely. Which brings us to something most sleep advice never addresses. And it turns out the way you spend your day either makes that shift faster or blocks it entirely. Which brings us to something most sleep advice never addresses. The 24-hour preparation protocol, winning the night before it starts. Here's something that most people don't want to hear because it requires effort at a time of day when you feel fine. The 3 a.m. crisis does not begin at 3 a.m. It begins at 2 p.m. or 5 p.m. or during dinner. Every unresolved thought, every mental tab left open, every item that lives on your mental to-do list with no home to go to, all of it accumulates through the day, and it's 3 a.m. when your rational moderator is offline. Every one of those open tabs crashes the system simultaneously. The first step in the 24-hour strategy is what I call the brain dump journal. At some point in the early evening, before 8 p.m. ideally, you sit with a physical notebook and you externalize everything. Not in a structured way, not in a journaling as therapy way. This is purely a data transfer. Everything living in your head gets moved to paper. The argument you need to have, the decision you've been avoiding, the thing you're worried you forgot, the thing you know you didn't forget but keep guess-seconding yourself on. Write it all down. Then, right next to each item, what's the next physical action I can take on this? Not the full solution, just the next step. What you're doing is closing the open tabs. You are telling your brain, this thought has a home now. It's recorded. You don't need to hold it anymore. Research on what psychologists call the Zeigergen effect, the tendency of the brain to obsessively return to uncompleted tasks, shows that simply writing down an intention to address something is enough to significantly reduce the mental intrusion of that thought. Your brain doesn't need the task completed, it just needs to know you haven't forgotten it. The second component of the 24-hour strategy is the sunset protocol. 2 hours before bed, you begin a deliberate wind-down of information consumption. This is not just about blue light from screens, though that matters. It's about cognitive stimulation. Watching a thriller, reading the news, getting into an engaging debate on social media, sending work emails. All of these activities fire up your problem-solving neural pathways right before you're asking them to go quiet. It's the equivalent of running a sprint and then lying down and asking your lungs to return to resting breathing in under 5 minutes. Instead, think of the 2 hours before sleep as a decompression chamber.
You are gradually reducing the pressure of mental stimulation. Slower content, warmer light, quieter conversation, less input, more processing. The people who sleep best, and I mean the people who genuinely rarely experience the 3 a.m. crash, tend to be people who protect this window with unusual consistency, not perfectly, but consistently. Your sleep does not begin when you close your eyes. It begins the moment you decide the day is winding down. Now, I want to be very honest with you about something, because there's a question sitting in the back of your mind right now, and I can tell you exactly what it is. What if I do all of this and it still does not work? That is the right question, and the answer is not what most people expect. Mastering the long-term reset, making this permanent. One night of the cognitive shuffle and a cortisol control strategy will help you. I want to be honest with you about that. It will help, but it will not permanently rewire years of a chronic overthinking pattern in a single evening. What you are building here is a neurological habit. And like any habit, it requires repetition at the level of consistency before the brain begins to automate it. Here is what to expect in the first week. Night 1, you may find the cognitive shuffle awkward. Your brain will pull hard toward the familiar patterns. Let it. Restart. The fact that you are noticing the pull and choosing to redirect, that is already different from what you've done before. Night 2 or 3, the technique will feel slightly more natural. The random imagery will come a little easier. You may still wake at 3 a.m., but the spike of alarm when you do might be a fraction lower. By the end of 2 weeks of consistent practice, the brain dump journal, the sunset protocol, the cognitive shuffle when needed, most people report that the intensity of the 3 a.m. wake-up has changed. Not eliminated, necessarily, but changed. The catastrophic weight of the thoughts has shifted. The physical alarm response is quieter. By the end of a month, you are not just using a technique, you are building a different relationship with your mind after midnight. Now, I want to address the 2 most common reasons this does not work for people in the early stages. The first is expectation. People try the cognitive shuffle once, wake up at 3 a.m. 3 nights later, and conclude it doesn't work. That is not a failure of the technique. That is a misunderstanding of how neurological retraining operates. You would not expect one gym session to produce visible muscle. The same logic applies here. The second reason is inconsistency in the daytime habits. The cognitive shuffle is the emergency brake. The brain dump journal and the sunset protocol are the brake pads. The maintenance that means you rarely need to pull the emergency brake hard. If you skip the daytime preparation consistently, you will be managing crises instead of preventing them. And here's the final thing I want to leave you with today, and I need you to actually sit with this, not just hear it. I want you to think about the last time you woke at 3 a.m., the specific weight of it, the way the dark felt heavier than it should, the way your chest was already tight before you were even fully awake, the way your mind went immediately to the thing you cannot fix right now, the thing that has no solution at 3 in the morning, and yet your brain would not let go of it. I want you to remember exactly how alone that felt. Because here is what I know about that moment, and what neuroscience actually confirms. Your brain in that state is not broken. It's not weak. It's not evidence that something is fundamentally wrong with you. It is a brain that cares deeply, fiercely, sometimes exhaustingly.
It is a brain that loves the people it is responsible for so much that it refuses to stop problem solving even when the sun has gone down and there is nothing left to solve. It is a brain that takes its job of keeping you safe so seriously that it would rather wake you up in a panic than risk missing something important. That is not your enemy. That is you, the most driven, most conscientious, most relentlessly caring version of you running the night shift without being asked. The work we have done today is not about silencing that part of your mind. It's about sitting down next to it, putting a hand on its shoulder and saying, "I've got this. It's written down. The next step is planned. And the single most powerful thing we can do right now for every person we love, for every problem we are carrying, for every version of tomorrow we're trying to protect, is rest." Because a rested mind doesn't just cope with hard things. A rested mind solves them. A rested mind sees the answer that the exhausted mind circled for hours and missed by inches. A rested mind is not a retreat from your responsibilities. It is the sharpest tool you have for them. You cannot pour clarity from an empty vessel, but a full one, a rested one, pours without effort. We take the breath so we can grow the life. That is not a tagline. That is a biological truth. The breath is the reset. The rest is the growth. And every night you choose to use what we covered today, every night you interrupt the cycle instead of being swallowed by it, you're making a choice that compounds, quietly, consistently, until one morning you wake up at a normal hour and you realize the 3 a.m. version of you has been getting smaller for weeks. That morning is waiting for you. It starts tonight. Now, here's what I want you to do right now, before this video ends. In the comments below, I want you to write one thing, just one, the one thought that most consistently wakes you up at 3 a.m. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to solve it here. Just name it. Because naming something is the first step to not being controlled by it. And I read every single comment on this channel, every one. If this gave you something real today, share it with someone who is fighting the same midnight battle. You might not know who that person is in your life right now, but they exist and they need this. Subscribe if you haven't yet, because what we're building here is not just a channel. It's a practice, a way of taking what life gives us and choosing deliberately to grow from it rather than be buried by it. And if you want to go deeper on the neuroscience of overthinking in sleep, specifically the role of the default mode network in anxiety, I've put together an episode that builds directly on what we covered today. I'll link it right here. I'm Dr. Silas Kincaid. We take the breath so we can grow the life. I'll see you in the next one.